Hello and welcome to Majoring in the Minors, a series covering the North American Academy scene. If you don't know, this video was voted for on my Twitter around a week ago. But to be honest, I'd begun writing this episode before I even posted that poll. Originally, this episode was going to be focused on Pocket Rhino, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was a lot more to talk about with Team Liquid. In episodes in the past where I've talked about entire teams, I've talked about them purely from a roster perspective from top to bottom. Instead, with Team Liquid, I want to describe them in a different regard and paint a more holistic picture, as opposed to only illustrating individual pieces such as players. I want to begin with the most glaring issue of Team Liquid Academy, the support situation. All the way back from the day Yama was signed, I announced my skepticism about his signing. After my video on the first week of Academy, I made it clear that Yama wouldn't work out for Team Liquid, and that he'd likely be through the revolving door of supports at the end of the split. I was actually wrong, he was out sooner. Pocket Rhino has been no improvement so far, and has earned the ire of basically everyone by posting really bad scorelines while making questionable plays. From personal insight, I can say Team Liquid had the choice of around 3 supports they played with in tryouts, and while I'm biased since I've worked with Rhino, I can easily say that Rhino was the best option if Team Liquid's objective was to develop talent. That being said, Rhino has clear weaknesses that were identified in the short time I've spent with him. He's extremely quiet, and he can have a hard time playing from behind. It doesn't take much to figure out that this is a dangerous combination. I sincerely hope Scott has been staying off of social media because he does not deserve the hate he's gained. Also, as an aside, I basically live right next to Scott. We get around 50 ping to the North American servers and 130 to the tournament realm. Playing on 130 ping is unplayable, especially when his best champions are Bard and Thresh. I'd literally rather play on EU West. Trust me when I say that Rhino is good, but he needs more time, and he's certainly in need of more coaching too. I wish we could have got more time with Rhino, but I do think that he has what it takes to be really good if he's not dropped into the dumpster right away. Don't let a few performances on 130 ping make you think otherwise. Rakara and Greg are best talked about together in my eyes. They're both lower tier players with at least a few redeeming qualities. Many of Greg's early games were actually quite good, and he had led the first blood percentage out of each jungler early in the split. But as the weeks went by, he definitely regressed in form. Greg ended the season with the lowest KDA out of starting junglers and the second lowest kill participation percentage. I know it's easy to point and laugh at Greg, but he wasn't the one holding Team Liquid back until later in the split, and he actually had a few good performances early on. Picks like Olaf, Volibear, and Set don't do him any service either, as it's impossible to not die when behind on these champions. Rakara similarly had a handful of pop-off games, mostly on Kai'Sa, but his performance was generally quite bad. I know this may seem tangential, but on Radiance we innovated Kai'Sa compositions that revolved around exclusively moving forward. Basically, they were caveman compositions that relied only on hard engaging and winning fights before the enemy team would react. Team Liquid would occasionally do something similar, as they would pair Set somewhere into the composition alongside Kai'Sa, which was another essential part of our own strategy. But a lot of these compositions were too spread out, and weren't dedicated to the singular idea of smashing fights as hard as possible. Picks like Kog'Maw, Karthus, or Nidalee would complicate what the composition was actually trying to accomplish. I'm not saying that a composition only needs to contain one idea, quite the contrary, that's actually an awful idea, just that these champions don't facilitate Kai'Sa as well as we found success with the champion. Rakara held 2 of Team Liquid's total 3 wins on Kai'Sa, and had a combined KDA of 16.5 against his total KDA of 3.11, the second lowest out of any starting AD carry. While Greg and Rakara's performances weren't to the level expected of them, a lot of tears have been shed on the behalf of Yasui. While Yasui had a pretty bad split, it's impossible to deny that he was a bright spot on a dark Team Liquid roster. In fact, I actually don't think Greg and Yasui were an awful 2v2. Yasui held some genuinely good performances on Irelia, Corki, Galio, Jace, and Set amongst others. Yasui's statistics, however, were really bad. He had the worst KDA out of all mid laners at 2.08. But there's something important that many people overlook. Yasui is primarily playing squishy melee champions on a team that's losing. When players pick champions like Azir, Orianna, or Syndra, they at least become the beneficiaries of the space that their frontline is creating for them, offering an opportunity to save their KDA in a losing fight. On the contrary, Yasui is the frontline for Team Liquid, as top laner Jenkins has a higher propensity to play ranged top laners relative to the rest of Academy. It's not as though Yasui is bad at melee champions, just that dying when behind on these champions is about as unavoidable as it gets. So we've nearly crossed through the entire roster of Team Liquid, and we haven't yet found a clear issue onto why they ended the split with only 3 wins. So surely the issue must be with top laner Jenkins, right? Well, Jenkins didn't have a great split, Generally, I think the meta wasn't favorable for him. Jenkins specializes in range top laners, specifically on the weak side, and most prominently Kennen. However, by the time that Kennen was meta, most teams would just ban it away from Jenkins, except for one game, where he decided to blind at top, got countered by Jace, and then won anyway due to a combination of a great game from Greg, and Jenkins just generally being really good at Kennen. Beyond that, I really just think that him and Greg didn't work well together. I don't do this often, but I'm willing to admit that I just don't really understand the difference between Jenkins' performance in spring and in summer. Each player I've talked to had a generally high opinion of Jenkins, and whenever I would play against him myself, I thought he performed exceptionally well on his champions, but wasn't extremely limited by his pool, despite it perhaps being a weakness of his. It's just an observation, and I don't have access to communications or anything, but Jenkins pushes up a lot and gets punished a lot more now than he did in spring. I don't know if Surenfire was communicating enemy jungle pathing more effectively than Greg, or if responsibilities around vision have changed, but I'm willing to vouch for Jenkins and say that there's something occurring that I just don't have information to make a fair assessment on. I don't think that Jenkins is a bad player, but I think he's playing far below his level for some reason or another. So far, we haven't learned much of anything at all. The players are playing mediocre, but this doesn't translate to a nightmare split like this. However, anyone who is paying close enough attention could see this train wreck coming. Between each player on TL.A, there just aren't enough people who are comfortable making decisive calls aside from perhaps Greg. It's no secret that in plenty of games, Team Liquid actually held a relatively large gold advantage due to successful early games. But their apparent indecision combined with experiences I've had, indirectly or indirectly with these players, is indicative enough of the issues that are facing Team Liquid. So many times, Team Liquid follow the same course. They get ahead in the early game, take a neutral objective or two, and then stall out and fail to coordinate a cohesive plan going into the late game. Team Liquid get a lead, and then there's no urgency to follow up on their lead, and it results in them conceding their advantage, seemingly willingly at times. I'm not someone who typically believes that there are players who simply don't work together. Rather, I think it's a failure of integration of how each of them wants to play the game. A really great example of this would be a team like 2019 Misfits, where each player was fantastic on paper at the time, but they mixed like water and oil, and the coaching staff was unable to become the emulsifier that the team needed. However, Team Liquid right now lacks a leader to lead them, and Grig isn't the solution to their question. I think Team Liquid need to reconsider the overall composition of their team. Yasui has been LCS ready for what feels like an eternity, and he's currently in the twilight of his career coming off a 3-15 split. If Yasui retires right now, the blood is on Team Liquid's hands for ruining his stock. As harsh as that sounds, putting Yasui on a team with Rikara and Yama in the bottom lane and expecting Grig to lead this team is just not going to work. This isn't to throw shade at Grig, but his strengths are elsewhere and don't fulfill what a rookie like Rhino or Yama needs. Going deeper into the structure of Team Liquid Academy itself, I think that the bureaucratic structure that is Team Liquid is unconducive to success for young, developing talent. I know a lot about Team Liquid, and when I hear the same thing from several different people, it tends to be true. I won't go into detail, but have some empathy. That goes to anyone from Team Liquid who is currently watching this video. Oftentimes, the very real emotional states of the players are jeopardized by the machinations of bureaucracy. While this isn't a plea for these young players to be handled with kids' gloves, I just would like to see more consideration being put onto the mental state of the players. While I think Pocket Rhino will be a clear upgrade over Yama in the future, that doesn't mean I like how the situation with Yama was dealt with, and it's entirely likely that Rhino will be thrown away before his potential is truly realized, in a vain attempt to chase success before it was meant to be. Overall, Team Liquid Academy is being pulled apart. Their players are underperforming individually, very likely due to a ruined mental state after a lack of initial success. Not a single player on the team has crucial leadership skills, their side lanes are known for being extremely quiet, particularly Rhino and Jenkins. The bureaucratic structure is weighing heavily on each academy player, and the atmosphere is unfitting for developing a group of players. I know this is a little bit different from the rest of my videos, and is more a combination of analytics with the human drama that is Team Liquid Academy, but I think it would be a massive disservice to speak on one without the other. These two things are deeply intertwined, and not recognizing each would leave us with an incomplete picture of what happened to Team Liquid Academy. In short, the pursuit of success caught up to the ones running the show. That's it from me. I just finished up with my finals and SGC, so I might make more videos relatively soon. Thanks to my graphics designer KingMe as always, and thanks to Gopherino for helping me with the presentation of some data. Links to their Twitters are in the description. Let me know what you thought about this episode below, and thanks for watching.